I'm on.
Yeah, same.
All right.
All right.
Here
What's
we
up, Kyle?
go.
Yeah. Hey, Kyle. Good to talk
Hey.
to you again.
Yeah. We were just touching base before we fired things up, and
Yeah.
it's been a little while since we've connected on some things. There's so much going on. Hey.
I mean, I keep telling people if you think that 2020 has been wild, if it's been crazy for you, it's just buckle up because it's kicking in high drive. We're about to see a lot of a lot of crazy stuff. We've already seen so much crazy stuff happen, um, but it's only picking up from here.
So it's Sunday, November or October 18th, 2020.
Yep.
And I don't know. Do you want to start? Like, what's going on? You're for those that don't know, you're out in the U.S.
Yeah. Yeah. So
traveling the U.S. in your truck. Why don't you tell
mhm.
people what you're up to?
Yeah, so I'm right now I'm in Arizona, just probably about 10. I'll give you a quick look around. Just at
Looks
this
nice
campsite.
there.
Yeah, I'm probably about 10 to 15 miles away from the Grand Canyon. I was planning
Okay.
to going to that either tomorrow or the next day, checking it out. I've been before, but it's
Cool.
one of those places where it's cliche, but it's so beautiful. But yeah, that's been kind of the idea. Is just
Yeah.
traveling around, seeing all the different parts of this country, seeing how beautiful it is, and it's been really great. And it's been fascinating to have the sort of contrast between having beautiful, nature around me, and then I can dip into the world of what's going on, and it's like, wow, holy smokes, like it's crazy out there. And
Hmm.
um, so it's been really helpful to kind of have that balance for myself because I've been able to really ground in nature, but
Good
also
for you to have that nature time. No,
Mhm.
I'm missing that right now. I'm more on work time, and you've
Right.
got that. Yeah, that's great balance to have.
Yeah, yeah, but it's been good. But yeah, so recently, I mean, I'll just jump right into kind of like I took a
Hmm.
break. I took a break from the news for a little bit, um, but just kind of jumping right into what's been going on. Like it's amazing the amount of censorship that's happening within big tech. Facebook, YouTube, Twitter, Instagram, all
So
of
for
them.
those that don't know, why don't you give a little lowdown of what's been censored? Some of the
Yeah,
big ones out
yeah.
there.
So there have been, and I'll go into the details on the stories specifically, but there have been several news articles that have come out, mostly centered around Hunter Biden and So his laptop was apparently left at some computer repair shop and confiscated. It wasn't claimed for the time under contract, and so when the computer repair shop went through it after 90 days, they were pretty horrified by what they found, and they submitted it to the FBI. Um, and right now it's under investigation because they're finding out that a ton of emails highlight how much um, Hunter Biden was working kind of with his dad in different deals um, in like Ukraine and Russia and China, um, that were kind of shady, and they were getting paid all sorts of money to make these deals, and look very questionable from that. But then you add to it, these are also being investigated by people who specialize in child pornography. So they're finding some really nasty images, incriminating photos and videos with him.
And this is pretty legit. Like this is,
Oh,
I've heard about this too in, well, I guess the alternative news, because the mainstream news wouldn't talk about
yeah,
this sort of stuff.
mm,
But it's pretty legit. This has
very.
really happened. His
Yeah,
computer was really seized.
yes, absolutely. That's all 100% verified. Some of the images that have been leaked are verified to be false, so they're not all true that have been leaked so far. I don't think we've seen
Hmm.
hardly anything as far as what's been on the laptop. We've only heard people talk about it and how, um, but these are people who are investigating it. They're well aware of what's on it, um, and it's just wild because like you said, the corporate media refuses to acknowledge it. Like they refuse to touch the story. They refuse to even talk about it. They refuse to ask if it's true or even throw a question to it. They just
Hmm.
have systemically.
Suspicious right there, right?
Yeah, right. And
Yeah.
this would be a
And
huge story even if it was false, even if the
yeah.
allegations were false, they would still talk about it. And then to add to that, whenever people try and share these links, because there've been there have been a number of articles that have come out, even by like the New York Post, which is a traditionally, pretty well established news publication, and people were sharing articles by the New York Post, and they were being removed from Twitter or not even allowed. Like sometimes you would type
Yeah, I've
in,
seen some of that happening.
Mhm.
Yeah.
Like you would type in the link to these articles into Twitter, and Twitter would just malfunction, quote unquote, or have some sort of error where the person couldn't actually post it, or they were slapped with
Hmm.
some sort of, goes against community guidelines or something, and it was just refused to be shared anywhere. The CEO of Twitter, Jack Dorsey, came out and apologized for that. He was like, "This shouldn't have happened." But then it happened once again with the next New York Post article that talked about more shady dealings that were found in these emails.
Hmm.
And so it's like they're they they're trying to get away with censoring, but they're not able to do it covertly anymore. They're having to be extremely overt with how
It's
they go about it.
interesting, hey? Like
Mhm.
it really does seem like those that are controlling all these YouTube and these different Twitter and whatnot. It seems like they're willing to take the chance right now of censorship to hide something. So like,
Yeah,
it actually really throws a lot of attention on them.
right.
So to me, it seems like a huge risk that they're doing this censorship. What are they hiding? Like what
Exactly. And
is it? Do you
it's
think it's mostly this Hunter Biden stuff is what
well,
they're
I
mostly
think
trying to hide?
I think it's because it's the tip of the iceberg. I think that once people start digging into how criminal a lot of these people are and how much they've been dealing in some really, really, really shady stuff, it's
Hmm.
only going to continue from there. Because right now we're told to believe that, everyone, all the politicians, everyone on TV, they're all like, we might disagree with them, but they're all pretty good people and they all have our best intentions. They might not do it exactly what we want them to do, but they have our best intentions in mind. Like that's the general sort of mainstream thought.
That's been our classic story. Yeah,
Right. That's
that's
what
what
that's
people
what
generally
we've
have
been told.
thought over the years.
Right. And now
That's what I
now
used to think up
right.
until last year, to be honest.
Yeah. I mean
Yeah,
it was
really, up
it
until COVID. Really, I never looked into politics, so I was one of those people just beginning of the year, to be honest.
right. Yeah, it was one of those
Yeah.
things where it was really easy to just go with that. But now we're seeing so much evidence coming out, and then you're starting to see the mainstream media and big tech and all of these people acting in cahoots. They're all coordinated in how they're
Hmm.
trying to steer messages and stifle certain others, keep people. And, just to mention, we talked about censorship, but there were also
Hmm.
tons and tons of accounts taken off of YouTube, taken off of Twitter, Instagram, without warning. And these people were given reasons of, breaking community guidelines or some vague things like that, but never given any specific examples of where community guidelines or what community guidelines were broken. And it's all very suspicious because it all comes around right around the same time that all this information starts to drop. And
So why don't you mention some of the ones that were censored in case that there's some people that are familiar with those or maybe
yeah,
don't even know.
Yeah, so some of the big channels that got removed without warning were like the X22 report, SGT report, Destroying the Illusion, um, Dr. Charlie Ward, to name a few. There were
What kind of doctor was him? Was he or is
I,
he?
I believe he's a doctorate in psychology, but he kind of jokes about
Oh,
that too. I don't
I
know
should
if
look him up. Okay.
um, I think he might actually just go by that name. I don't know how much of an actual doctor he is. Um,
Yeah, who knows? Okay.
but he's but yeah, those are just to name a few of the names of the channels that were just completely removed without any sort of warning.
Edge of Wonder was
Yeah,
taken off
Edge of
too.
Wonder was another big one,
And a
and
lot of those have like 500 or over 500,000
tons of
subscribers,
tons of
which are
subscribers.
often less than they actually are because they a lot of times get capped out, like Rashid Buttar, Dr.
R-
Rashid Buttar, right?
Right. Yeah, exactly. And that's
I'm
what.
surprised he's still up.
Yeah, yeah. We'll see how long any.
Obviously, Del Bigtree was taken down a while ago,
Mhm.
High
Yeah,
Wire.
it seems to be a pretty consistent trend that we've seen this past year, especially where channels that speak too much truth that kind of contradict that narrative that's pushed by the corporate media, they're not allowed
Hmm.
to continue sending that message. And so we had another just big purge this past weekend with some of those we mentioned.
So, do you feel like this giant purge right now is is mainly because of the Biden stuff, and then that links to bigger stuff, and people are talking about the Clintons now, and all the spying on Trump. You like him or not, the spying shouldn't have been done.
Yeah, right. I think it's all very politically motivated because we're right before the election. They don't want any of this truth coming out because it's disruptive towards these people's goals. The amount of coordinated effort kind of proves to me at least that they're definitely in cahoots with how they operate and how
Yeah,
they
that's pretty obvious.
what their goals are. And so then when you've kind of come to terms with, okay, these guys are all in cahoots, they're all working together, what's their goal? It becomes
Hmm.
very clear to see based on which messages are being silenced and which false messages are allowed to proliferate. Because I mean,
Hmm.
there's been plenty of false things that have been allowed to be put out there, stuff that could have been, fact checked because it was
Hmm.
false, but wasn't. And then all of
And really
this,
harmful stuff too that's out
right,
there that could have been censored.
right. And
Yeah.
instead, they choose to censor stuff that is verifiable, stuff that is proven true, and give no warning and no reasons other than, just the implied, which is because it doesn't fit with what they want to be told. They don't
And
want
even
people
that's
knowing
kind of
about it.
interesting because some of the things that they've been censoring and the shows they're taking down, like you even say, I don't know, Edge of Wonder, for example. I've watched a little bit of their stuff, and some of it's really heart opening for some people. It could really be good information for them to learn about bigger issues going on, possibly.
Right.
And so it's interesting that these censorship companies would take down something like that.
Yeah.
I don't know. It just to me, it's so obvious that that would be a chance for people that are new to this and are just waking up to like, whoa, this is worse than I thought. The government's worse than I thought. That would be some really really quick red pills to go. Why would anyone be taking anything down unless it's really something malicious and harmful?
Right. Well, and to me, it shows desperation because
Exactly.
there
That's the way
is
it
that
seems.
there is that Streisand effect where if you tell somebody they can't know about something, that's automatically going to turn it into that forbidden fruit that's more desirable. And
Yeah.
they're well aware. I mean, these people are very very good at psychological warfare
Oh
over the
yeah.
population. So they understand how the human psyche works.
Hmm.
And the fact that they're willing to do this, to go to this blatant censorship, means that they're running out of options of getting away from this truth, and the truth is eventually going to come back and reveal them for who they are. And this is a desperate sort of last attempt to stifle that, but it's not going to
So where
work.
do you see things going?
Well,
How do you see the next month, 2, 3
uh,
evolving?
well, the next month is going to be, yeah.
It's
I
gonna be
mean, the next
crazy
next
with the
next
U.S. election.
yes,
Oh my
everything leading
goodness.
up to and probably immediately after the US election is going to be wild because no matter what happens, there's a group of people who are, think it's the end of the world for them as soon as whatever happens.
Hmm.
Whether it's actually true or not, is a different matter. But regardless, that sort of gut reaction that people are going to have, or that sort of emotional reaction, I should say, um, is going to be pretty wild. And I think we will see quite a bit of civil unrest. I think we'll see, and I I don't really anticipate Trump losing. I don't think that's going to happen, and I think people on that side of the spectrum are pretty afraid of that result. But it's going to turn into that way, yeah, to where it's
It
going to
seems
be
like those seeds are being planted already. I mean, it's obvious. Anyone watching any of back and forth right now, it's pretty obvious that they're creating this new narrative that the votes won't all be in
mhm,
at the November 4th or whatever it is, and so there's going to be a delay to get the rest of the votes in, and so Trump, what do we do to get him out if he doesn't accept defeat? And it's like, how can you even get there yet? This hasn't. Um, why are you trying? It seems so interesting. They're pushing this narrative
right,
now. What will you do if you don't leave? When that, like, the same thing could be asked to Biden.
right.
It's
Well, and it's funny because the people who do ask those kind of questions, who say that are, continue to ask Trump, are you going to acknowledge the results of the 2020 election and step down if you lose? And he says yes. He said yes many times to that, but they continue to push this topic. And it's funny because these are the same people who refuse to accept the 2016 election results. You know, for 4 years have been doing everything legal or illegal to try and get rid of this man, you know, regardless of what you think about him. It's the ways that they've gone about it to try and remove him have been completely insane.
As a Canadian, I mean, you're American, I'm Canadian. As a Canadian, I sit back. I never used to follow politics. I mean, I'll be the first to say when Trump got in, I thought, "Oh, USA, you're screwed." And now I
Right,
look at him really quite different when I look at what he's doing and what he's done. Never mind
right.
his personality. It's besides the point. But I sit back here in Canada and go, like, what a waste of time and resources that all they've done for 3.5 years or whatever it is fight him
Yeah,
and spend all this government money and tax dollar money to do all these investigations that went nowhere. And it's
mhm,
just, it's like a temper tantrum for three and a
right.
half years when
Yeah,
the guy's in, whether you like him or not. Get some stuff done for the country here.
right. Exactly.
Stop
Do
your
your
pity
job.
party. And it seems like such a waste of resources. It seems
Mhm,
completely unethical
mhm,
and immoral that they would do that.
mhm. When especially now when we continue to see evidence pile up that not only were all of those investigations shams and they didn't go anywhere, if they had evidence against Trump or anyone in his administration, they would be all over the front page
Oh,
news.
they would
It
be
would be
all over
blasted
him.
everywhere. But the fact
Yeah.
that they don't have anything is the only reason that they can't talk about it, except for making up stuff. They do that quite often. Or just keep repeating the same lies, like talking about Russian collusion. Like no matter how many times they've disproved that, the Russia boogeyman comes out, and it's funny because not only are we finding out that none of those were true, we're finding out that all of those were projections on what they were doing. And the only Russian collusion that happened were with Hillary Clinton and the Uranium One deal. And the only Ukraine quid pro quo was with Joe Biden saying they better fire the prosecutor or the investigator if they wanted this money. And then yeah, and so it's just been a constant, constant like everything they've tried to blame on Trump turns out they were doing. And the whole spying on Trump's campaign too. Like it's wild. It's
It's
wild.
interesting because your clown show in the USA has actually made me reflect more and look at Canadian politics.
Right. Yeah,
And
we're seeing it
I
all over the place.
I never used to think much about it until, with the whole COVID thing and just how you see one country doing something and another country copy it, another one copy, and then there's a couple outliers that aren't doing that. There's obviously some coordination with certain countries.
Mhm.
And you look at what's happening right now with Canada, and I saw a meme the other day someone made that Trudeau has spent more money in the past year than all other past prime ministers put together. And you look around and it's like, come on, uh, come on. Like, I'm in British Columbia. There's no COVID problem here. There's some people with flus and colds and whatnot, but
Mhm.
it's no worse than any other year. And
Right.
mostly across all of Canada, it is just another flu season. And we
Yeah.
spend that much money to shut things down. I'm just, wow. And so it's made me look into politics more.
Mhm.
And I'm just, the deeper I go, the more shocked I am of how
Right.
asleep I've been.
Yeah, it's wild. I mean, what you saying
I
that
was
about,
mentioning to you, oh, sorry.
oh, well, I was just going to say, you saying that about the flu. I saw a great statistic that week from this, or maybe it was last week, but last week, this year, and last week, last year, as far as the number of flu cases reported. I think this year there were only about seven or so. I think this was a statewide. I can't remember what state,
Oh,
what state, but there were seven reported this year, and then last year there were well over like 900 something flu cases reported in that state. And it's like,
so they're not calling COVID a flu,
right.
right?
Yeah,
Oh,
they're just
this is COVID.
calling everything
And
COVID. Right.
yeah, and even though the test has so many false positives, it's just
Right.
all lumped in
Yeah,
COVID. It's
right.
it's just
A
it's so
fruit tested
it's
positive. A
amazing.
fruit tested positive. A
Yeah,
goat
I heard
tested
about
positive.
that.
Like it's just come on,
As
guys.
as a as a psychologist, I look at the mental health impacts on people, and it
Mhm.
just frustrates me so much. And if people could just reflect and see how hypocritical and judgmental they have become with all of this. You know, I can, in where I'm in Victoria, I can go to one shop right now and they're not forcing masks, and I can go in and do my thing. The other day I went to redo my insurance, and the whole sidewalk was quarantined off, and you couldn't get through until someone came and greeted you. And this lady came out like there was a plague inside there with a little, you know, she had to get contact tracing. And I went, sorry, I'm not giving my information for contact tracing. And she was shocked. It was like this program inside of her went default, default. Like that doesn't compute.
Right.
And I said it's ridiculous to try and track, you know, a flu. It doesn't make sense. I was really kind to her, and she, well, you have to. I said, well, actually,
No,
I don't.
I don't.
And she said, yeah, it's a government thing. And I said, actually, it's not. I said, are you telling me this is your company policy? Are you saying you won't serve me unless I sign this? And she said, yes. I said, well, I guess you're forcing me to. So I gave her my information. And then, you know, the person that helped me inside, you know, you have to walk a certain way around. Some people were wearing masks, some weren't. It was just the most awkward, strange thing. And sometimes people have to just stop and go, why are you even doing this? Like, just
It's
stop and think about what you're doing.
yeah.
It shows how easily we can be conditioned.
Hmm.
And
Yeah.
when I hear people talk about communism and whatnot, I used to laugh. Oh, come on. Now I look around and I realize how easily we're being just conformed into these
Yeah.
small groups of different things. And we all
It's
turn against each other, and
it's amazing.
shocking.
I mentioned I'm near the Grand Canyon. I've been going to national parks. The amount of people that wear masks while they're hiking outside, it blows my mind. Like I kid you not, I would say 75% of the people walking around national parks, between 50 and 75%, have all been wearing masks all the time. Like you're outside, away from people. You know, there are people walking around, but you're not that close to them. And we knew this way back that the sun and the outside air, all of it, were hugely beneficial to preventing. I mean, there's a lot of misinformation about how this thing
Crazy.
spreads anyway, but like being outside,
Yeah.
that was like a commonly understood thing that's you're way better off outside. And yet people are still
Oh,
so
instead of
conditioned, like you said.
breathing a diaper on your face, like
Right,
it's people don't realize they're breathing in their exhaust.
right,
This is their human exhaust that's coming out of us.
right.
And so you're trapping that and then you're breathing it back in.
Yeah.
That doesn't make any sense.
No, it doesn't. It
Yeah.
doesn't at all.
But I mean, it's, you know, my concern is I showed you before we started talking today that there was that link that was sent to me. I forget the girl's name there on Instagram. Oh, it's what's her face? And just so I can tell someone that this actually is true. And she posted on here, I watched her video she put up, and she goes into talking about how government of Canada has, or they've issued to hire 30,000 national defense security personnel that would be trained in tear gas and other things. 30,000. And you see the link, you can see it's government of Canada. It's quite official. And then the other one was how they're building these retention or detention camps for people. One of our
To quarantine them.
to quarantine them, yeah, for different reasons, for traveling. They actually, I read a paper where one politician was saying that, you know, even if someone wanted to get away from a household that might have COVID, well, you could go to one of these places, and there'd be a fence around to protect you from other people
Right,
that might. Are you kidding me?
right.
And we have a politician. Oh, what's his name now? Oh, Hillier. I should know his name. He's this mover and shaker in Canadian politics, and I've seen him out in Parliament, and he brought up these two different things, and he actually asked them, "Can you explain to me what these camps are and who would be in those?" And they wouldn't answer the question.
Of course not.
And he asked again, and then the Speaker of the House stood up. He stood up and he looks around and he goes, "Next question." He just dismissed him.
Wow.
And I thought, my God, you won't even explain to the people of Canada what you're doing. It's just like, on one side, I want to walk around and shake people because we can't walk around with our heads in the sand anymore.
Hmm.
But at the same time, I don't want to induce fear on everyone as well.
Right.
But it's just such an interesting time right now of awakening.
Right. Well, and I, just to comment on that, like I think there's nothing to fear with seeing all of this, but we do have to come to terms with that there are two opposing factions. One of them is pushing all of this COVID fear and pushing the fact that, you know, all the way to the extreme of having quarantine camps where you can be safely separated from your family members, like it's that faction versus the other who's pushing for the truth, pushing for the end of corruption, pushing for freedom of information and not pushing fear. Like COVID's a real thing. Yeah, we needed to be concerned about it way back when.
It's a
Now
real flu,
now
totally.
now
Yeah.
now we have lots of information about it, and we need to acknowledge that information. We have lots of information about the mess that we're using and not using. We need to acknowledge that information,
Hmm.
but you have this narrow-minded perspective that is only focused on the fear, and when you look behind who's pushing that fear, you see their aims are only about control. It's all about controlling the masses and steering them into a particular mindset. Um, and we've got to acknowledge that. And so I think, again, there's nothing to fear because I don't think that faction is doing very well. I don't think they're going to win, and I don't think they're going to overcome, but they're going to keep pushing that idea because it's kind of like like they have to try and fight for it, because if all of
Hmm.
their corruption of all of these schemes get exposed, it's the end of them. It's the end of that whole
I know.
mindset. And so they're going to fight to the very end to get it out there. But it's up to us as people. We can't wait for any saviors or anyone to say like, okay, we're
Yeah.
gonna we're gonna get brought out of this. We have to take
Yeah.
responsibility of like, this is the
Yeah.
truth. And
There's no
and
victim consciousness in this. Yeah.
exactly. Yeah. And just, yeah,
Yeah.
take responsibility
If
for it.
if if I don't know if this is a good way to look at it, but if the average person could just take half an hour and think about this and actually sit down and imagine that this is a year ago, okay? Because right now these flu numbers for COVID are going to be maybe this as another flu season, maybe even less possibly, or maybe a little higher, whatever, but in that range. You
Yeah,
could look
right
at
around there.
5 years of a flu season, especially back when H1N1 was here, and
Or you can
and
just
this would
look
be nothing big.
right, or you
But
can
if
look at
someone could, hmm?
well, just to add to that example, you can look at the total death counts for the past 5 years, and we are right on par, like exactly the same
Yeah,
average monthly deaths year over year. So like there has been no
I mean,
sizable difference.
you could go into a lot of the deaths were comorbidities that were
Right,
included this year and not in previous years. So that
right.
would even make it. But my point around that is that if the average person could get away from the right, wrong, oh, I think this and I think that, and just go back to what if a few years ago, when I think that was 2016, we had the Fort Mac fires up here, and I went up there and I was or came down, I got really sick, whatever virus that was. I had it, kicked my ass, and it was really bad. If someone was to say, Kyle, that year the government came out and did all these things and talked about social distancing and all this and put quarantine camps in, and this is what happened, and you can't hang out with families and you have to have your bubble of people, I'd go, yeah, right. It was a flu season. It came, it went. Elderly sometimes die. It's unfortunate, heartbreaking. There are the odd young people that have issues or whatever else, comorbidities. It happens.
Hmm.
If somebody was to say that they would do this year with all these draconian measures, if they would have done 4 years ago, I'd go, no way. I wouldn't believe it. But
Mm-mm.
yet they're believing this.
Right,
Like people are actually believing that
right.
this is worse than it was 4 years ago. We
Yeah.
had a bad flu come through Western Canada here. Worse than it is now.
Hmm.
Yeah, there was lots of people in hospitals and
Right.
clogging up emergency rooms.
Yeah, it happens every year. It's
Yeah,
pretty nasty, and people die. It's not a fun thing to go through, but it's a way of life, and it's that social conditioning of the only thing that's different between that and this. You take the same data, the same end results, the same factors, the
yeah.
same physical factors that are actually affecting people, and you compare the two, they're identical. But then you look at the
So
fear
that
and the propaganda, that's the only
exactly.
difference. That's the
So
only
that yeah.
difference.
So that begs the question: what's different? So
Right.
anyone could look at this information and go, okay, Kyle, you got a point there. You know, what if it was H1N1 or whatever it was 4 years ago? That was pretty bad. I knew a lot of people that got sick with it. I don't
Mhm.
know anyone that's been sick with COVID. Okay, but I knew a lot in 2016 that were sick. Many,
Mhm.
like, they're walking around going, if you're sick, don't come to work. Um, so I think a lot of people could resonate with, yeah, okay, I'll agree with you on that.
Mhm.
Then you'd have to beg the question, so what's different about this? And the difference is the year of disclosure.
Mhm.
This is the year where things are coming out. This is the year where the corrupt politicians are being exposed.
Mhm.
Everyone knows
Mhm.
that Canada has corrupt politicians more than ever.
Mhm.
Trudeau's been caught with his hand in the cookie jar so many times now. Bill Morneau resigned.
Mhm.
You know, he partly owner of Morneau Chappelle. You know, the huge extended third care insurance plan. So
Mhm.
like there's all these politicians that are coming out. You see it in the US politics. So
Mhm.
like this is the year of disclosure.
Mhm.
That's the difference.
Mhm.
So what people need to do is delve into some of these things we're talking about, and you will easily see that everyone's getting busted right now.
Yeah, and the truth just makes sense, when you don't have the truth, when you're just working with a bunch of lies, like it seems really chaotic. It seems like what the hell is going on? Like why is all this
Mm-hmm.
stuff happening? This year seems crazy. Like what's going on?
Mm-hmm.
How's this happening? But when you get the truth, when you find out what the truth is, and I'm not claiming to know what the whole truth is because that's impossible for me to know the whole
Mm-hmm.
truth, but I am aware of very, very distinct aspects of truth that are not shared with the general public. And not having these vital pieces of information, I mean, I would be lost. I wouldn't know what was going on. It wouldn't make
Exactly.
sense. You wouldn't have any, but as soon as you start unraveling the truth and using those
Mm-hmm.
pieces to your puzzle, all of a sudden the picture makes sense. Like you start to see like what's going on and why this happened this way, why this went off in this particular direction. And um, but we have to come to that responsibility. We can't shrug off that responsibility onto these news and media corporations to tell us what the information is and what is true because they have been proven time and again to be liars. And until we take
Well,
responsibility,
it's big business. It's
right?
big business.
It's
And
big
they want to
business.
keep the business they've created.
Right. It's
They want to
all
keep
it's
that
all
structure.
exactly. It's all designed to keep everything together as it was when as it was
When
not
we were
beneficial to anyone
Yeah,
except
when
for
we're letting it
those.
happen.
Right.
And I think that might be a good note, just on a side note. I mean, we don't have a huge audience right now, but if we had some people, we're mostly doing this because we just feel like we want to do our part.
Mhm.
And if 5 people watch this, hey, 5 people to hang out with, I feel happy.
Right.
But you know, I would be really curious to get some feedback if we had a couple people make comments or email us. Not hard to find our information.
Mhm.
But I would happily do a video with you, and we were talking about this earlier, talking a bit more about the spiritual side. You know, we're
Right.
not really bringing it into this conversation. It gets confusing,
Mhm.
um, and it's not a religion thing. It's a spiritual thing. It's an energy based. It's a metaphysical thing.
Definitely.
And I think it might be beneficial for us to maybe do a video like that at some point too. We were talking about that
Yeah, I
because
think
that's the bigger picture,
right.
really.
That's the real reason why all this is happening. That's
Yeah,
the
it's like a war between good and bad,
right.
between dark and light. It's hard for some people to conceptualize if they haven't already gone there. But I think anyone that could look at their life in some way and say, yeah, there is, those that are, they'd throw someone under the bus, they'd manipulate, they'd be malevolent. There are those people out there. But then there's more people that are good people.
Mhm.
That's the game. That's
Right.
exactly what's happening. And our
And
world that's the conversation we would go into.
right. Yeah, definitely. I mean, the world was designed to ensure those quote unquote bad or service to self people they're set up for success. That's how the world
Yeah,
was set up, so that they were.
it's a business.
Hmm.
Yeah, it's
and
a big,
and
big business.
and if you were benevolent, you wouldn't necessarily make it. You'd have a lot harder time surviving all these other so that's sort of the era that um that dominated for most of this previous year. But now we're seeing a transition. We're seeing a switch,
Mm.
a swap, where those who were malevolent are going to be exposed and give way to the next era where those who are willing to act in that benevolent way, service to others, are able to flourish. And it's exciting to
Hey,
see.
here's a question for you. question for you. Do you think that part of this shift is happening? I mean, some people talk about a great awakening, a planetary shift, calendars of Mayan prophecies and whatnot. But getting away from that a little bit, I mean, that's a fascinating talk, and I'd go there with you sometime for sure. We've
Hmm.
talked about that. But do you think part of what's happening right now is just the resonance of thought that people are seeking for the truth more than ever, and what that is doing is actually unstabling the whole structure of what's going on, and
Absolutely.
people seeking into this, people like you and me that, well, me, I mean, I've only known you a couple of years, but I would have been one that just stayed in the background, didn't talk about this stuff,
Hmm.
didn't want to talk about politics, la 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 la, it's not that bad. So even me waking up to this would
Hmm.
create that vibration of seeking and looking. And do you think that's a big part of what is happening right now? Is that
Abs-
awakening to seeking?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
I think there's I I I I know there's a divine influence with how that sort of transition, what provides the catalyst for allowing that to happen. But as soon as it does, it's like a ripple effect, and to where one person gets activated, they start rippling out, and another person gets activated, they start rippling out, and it just grows and grows and grows and grows into this expansive process that we're going through right now. But yeah, absolutely. I think that's
Because
100%
the
accurate.
big thing for me, I'm always trying to teach people with my work, whether it's individual or group, is thoughts become things.
Hmm.
I mean, I just want to have t-shirts everywhere. I should name my company Thoughts Become Things,
Right.
because they become things inside of us neurologically and biochemically. And what's harder to understand for some people is they become things outside of us in the field of consciousness. And anyone that looks into it knows that the metaphysical actually creates the physical.
Right.
Like the sun energy, the photons create everything on the earth.
Right.
Everything comes from metaphysical.
Right.
Um,
And that's why
but
we
it's like, that's a big thing I want to try and get out to people, but sometimes it's just too deep of a topic.
Yeah, yeah, and so I agree. I mean, I think diving into a whole nother video on that sort of stuff, and just
Hmm.
really getting into the sort of spiritual implications of what's happening and how, because it's all micro to macro, like everything that we're
Hmm.
experiencing on a sort of social economic level, we are experiencing internally as well to some degree or another, and that sort of real unwillingness to come to terms with sort of uncomfortable aspects about our personality or our character, how we come across to people, are also manifesting in aspects about our society that we are unwilling to acknowledge or accept as true. And so it plays
Hmm.
out in all these different ways, but it's the we can't really push it off any longer. Like the time is
Hmm.
here. We get to kind of decide how long it's going to take and how painful that transition is. Because the longer we take to
So
sort
yeah,
of accept
another
it.
thing, yeah, another thing on that note, I totally agree that it is a micro to macro, but I think this is a unique time where there's also a lot of macro to micro. I think there's a
Oh,
lot
for
of
sure. It goes
cosmic
both ways.
energy coming in right now, right? And I
Yeah.
think a lot of people, it's like clinically, I've seen a lot of people that were last year doing a lot of work in mindfulness and meditation and trying to quiet their mind. And even for those that just know meditation is just good for you, versus those that feel they're tapping into something else, hey, it's all beneficial. But there is that theme of training our minds to be more calm and still, and people feel better, healthier inside.
Right.
That's been lost a lot. And
Mhm.
everyone's so focused on the clown shows online everywhere. And oh, wow. So I feel like there's this loss of connection some people have made with the micro to the macro that could also be reactivated sometimes. And I think there's a
Absolutely.
huge source of potential energy that people could be tapping right now to guide them, whether
Yeah,
they believe
it's
in a God, a creator, source, universe, guides, angels. I mean, you pick whatever floats your boat.
yeah, God doesn't
It's all
care.
relevant. No, it's
God doesn't
all,
care what you call him
yeah.
or her.
But yeah, I think that would be neat to do a video on that, see if we can tie some of that together for people, because it really gives a practical component to this
Mhm.
where you can start to utilize your thoughts during the day to manifest consciousness in here and out there.
Mhm.
And yeah, I don't want to go too deep into that, but you know what I mean.
Yeah. Yeah, no, I think it's all extremely relevant and it's fascinating. It's difficult to try and pin all together into to one thing, but it's all so
Hmm.
relevant. Um
What a time to be here, hey?
yeah.
What a time.
Yeah. Yeah. So I guess on that note, should we kind of wrap up
Sure.
with this conversation? Were there any
Yeah.
particular things that you wanted to add to or touch on before we close out?
Hmm, no, I mean, I think the only thing I'd like to finish with is, I mean, my typical thing that I say, thoughts become things.
Hmm.
And if people could just really like, look at the side of that, we're thinking in every moment. And either we're thinking of things that are rooted in fear and worry and concern and judgment and separation and division. And the more that we divide, the more that we're separate, the less we co-create. And
Definitely.
the more that we accept, the more that we, have a little more compassion, a little more forgiveness, then we unite more in thought energy, and then we manifest more as well. So I would just really invite people to, whatever you believe, Biden, Trump, left, right, masks or anti this or that, all human beings trying to figure this out. And if we can just open this thing up a little more, the universe around us will just vibrate out into reality.
Well said.
Yeah.
Yeah, I'd echo that completely. And just to add to it, with what's coming out and with what we're going through, just focus on having grace for people. To kind of echo what I said in my last video, just have grace for people as we go through this time. It's going to be really difficult for all of us to go through. It's going to be really difficult. It's the hardest thing any of us have ever gone through. So just have grace with people. We're going to react in different ways. We're going to, you know, come across in harsh ways to different people depending on what we think is right and what we think is wrong.
Hmm.
And just go back to that, like Kyle said, go back to that center place, go back to that heart, and make sure that you just have grace and compassion for people as we go through this, because it's going to be tough, but it's up to all of us to how we respond to things and how it actually plays out.
Hmm.
But yeah,
Yeah, and I think we're all thinking more. We're being forced into separation. We're being forced into social distancing. So I think to open this up more, it's going to bring us together in ways that we need more now than ever. Because
yeah,
it's just we're getting such less human contact with each other.
right, definitely, yeah.
Well,
Well,
always a
well said.
pleasure, my friend.
Yeah, I appreciate it. All right, I'll talk to you next time, Kyle.
All right, sounds good. Yeah, be safe out there.
Bye.